Okay, folks, let's try to explain to an awful lot of retards, mentally deficient idiots, how the World Trade Center towers, the Twin Towers, how they collapsed inside the outside of the building. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of a prop here. I'm going to use a very long box that sort of looks like the Twin Towers. You notice how that looks sort of like the Twin Towers, and the planes flew into the top part of the building, like everybody can clearly see on the videos in New York City, especially the video from Battery Park, the one shot about a mile away with a telephoto lens, where the plane comes flying in, it twists, and it slams into the building, and then the top part of the building starts falling down when the towers collapse. Now, I want you to notice something. The building is hollow inside, where the debris from the upper floors, as they went boom, 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 and they fell inside the exterior of the building. One more time. The box is hollow, and it's like the World Trade Centers. And the building debris, as it builds up inside the outside of the building, as it begins to collapse. The bottom line is it all fell inside the outside of the towers. Now, the outside of the towers, quite literally, were steel box columns. And if you look at the buildings as they stand in all of the videos, they look almost identical to this very long and very hollow box. Inside the towers, there were floors that were not designed to carry the massive amounts of debris that were falling boom, 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 boom inside the building and causing those squibs. People kept talking about the explosions of the squibs coming out many floors below. Well, that's because the floors were collapsing inside, creating a very large and extremely massive, very, very heavy pile of collapsed debris. And the floor decks were not designed to carry that kind of weight. So the floor decks went boom, 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 boom. Just exactly the way the firefighters described it. I hope I haven't confused you with the cardboard box being hollow and how the building can fall into itself. The floors, the debris from the top 20 floors of the building all of a sudden moved at once. And it hit the floors inside. All of the mass of the floor decks, the steel, everything that was on the inside of the building was contained within the exterior of the building, which acted exactly like a debris chute on a construction site or a laundry chute. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for the record, I spent many, many, many years building high-rise buildings. I spent many, many, many years building elevator shafts and stairwells on the inside of the outside of skyscrapers. So for all these conspiracy theorists and debunkers that are out there, my name is Judson Witham, and I worked in Houston, Texas for many years on 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 and even 80-story buildings. Transco Gas in Uptown Houston. The Texas Commerce Bank Tower, 72 stories. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the list of contractors and the list of people who know that I built skyscrapers is long. So anybody wants to call me some crazy old man, I get called crazy old man all the time. Well, this crazy old man, he's very familiar with scientific evidence. He gets it. And I happen to be one of the people that went over to the BYU there in Provo, Utah, and I spoke with Professor Steve, whatever his name is there, I forget, it's been too long ago. I spoke with the professor there about the incendiary materials that he'd been talking about. It'll all come to me. It's early in the morning. I'm not thinking about it very well this morning, I guess. I don't know what the hell he called it. The stuff that supposedly cut through the steel beams and all this other stuff. And that's fine. You know, I don't have any problem with his scientific investigations. But you got to remember something, folks. Oh, thermite. The thermite theories there about how there was thermite found in the dust of the building and all this other stuff. Stephen Jones came to me there. Old Steve Jones. Professor Stephen Jones in the science department at Brigham Young University. I went up and spoke with him in his offices for a little while one day. Ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line here is that welding rods that are used to weld beams together are coated in a flux. And welding beams, as they're welding steel, weld at incredibly high temperatures. So a lot of that so-called thermite that was found in the debris piles of the World Trade Centers, you might look into flux coatings on welding rod and see if there's any that are made using thermite or thermite-like materials. Back to the cardboard box here for a second. Let me back up here and show you this old cardboard box a little bit more. You notice it looks quite similar to the World Trade Towers. Now, if you dump a bunch of debris inside the box, where it builds up in the box, boom, 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 as each one of these floors and all this top 20 floors or so comes crashing down inside. It's inside the towers. The mass, the weight of all that falling debris caused the building to fail internally. You couldn't see it. It was on the inside of the exterior of the box columns. It was falling inside the exterior, making the exterior of the building splay out, just like a banana peel, just like a banana being peeled. The weight pushed the exterior box columns out, and the building started spitting out steel beams, and all kinds of enormous stresses and enormous forces were being released as that building, or those towers, the two towers, collapsed inside the exterior of the buildings. Now, that being said, there is obvious questions about whether the building had been pre-wired for demolition. The elevators and the core structures of the building being worked on by the Bush family's company there in the days prior to the attack. World Trade Center 7. I want to move on to that, I guess it was a 47 story. On the very top of the 47 story, World Trade Center 7. As you watch it fall, you notice that the elevator control houses, where the elevator motors and all the air conditioning and heating and the electrical equipment for the 47 story, they're on that very top. It's called a control house, elevator house. You'll notice that the elevator house roof moves first. The elevator house all the way across the top of that 47 story collapses And that's basically what you see first. And then you see the 47-story buckle, all the way across the building, buckle, windows are smashing all over the place from the stresses of the core. The core collapsed underneath the elevator house. You can't have the elevator motors, the control house of the building, move in a downward fashion unless everything beneath it has failed, has fallen down. That's why the elevator roof, the very tippy top of the building, the elevator control rooms start moving first. That tells you that everything beneath it has failed. I mean, you can't have it any other way. Now, one thing that's quite obvious is nothing's pushing down on the top of the elevator houses. So the only way possible for it to be collapsing and failing is for what's holding it up to have failed catastrophically all the way across the building. Now, this brings us to what was going on inside that building. Whose offices were inside that building? Everybody remembers Enemy of the State film with Gene Hackman and, I had that black guy's name right on the tip of my tongue. It'll come to me here in a minute. But Gene Hackman and Will Smith, there we go, Will Smith in Enemy of the State. They're kind of hiding out in Gene Hackman's little parking garage structure when the FBI and the CIA show up to take Will Smith and Gene Hackman into custody. And as they exit the adjacent building in the station wagon, everybody remembers that station wagon scene where Gene Hackman hits the button and his parking structure blows up with all the CIA and FBI and Secret Service guys inside that are hunting them. They're being hunted down as enemies of the state. The Central Intelligence Agency was operating on a massive scale in World Trade Center 7. The massive financial markets and the logistical expediters, if you will, the people that were the shakers and movers in U.S. foreign activities in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq and Iran and Israel and, Pakistan and all across Slovenia there, all across Palestine and in the entire region that was being controlled during the days of the Shah of Iran and Saddam the insane man there from Baghdad. The massive amounts of clandestine black operations money and all the logistics of controlling the Central Intelligence Agencies and the U.S. State Department. So you got the State Department and the CIA and the Department of Defense all conducting black operations on a grand scale out of World Trade Center 7. Now you got a problem. You got a big problem. The two trade towers have just fallen, and they were full of all kinds of financial companies and logistical companies that were working with the CIA. Isn't this correct, Donald J. Trump? Let's talk about the triad, Donald J. Trump. The Khashoggis, the Bin Ladens, the Gabanifars, the Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas. You know what I'm talking about, Donald J. Trump. Your affiliations with the Trump princess and your direct involvement with the triad mafia, Donald Trump, from uptown Houston. The Clintons, the Bushes, Joanna King, Congressman Charlie Wilson, and the Bin Ladens. The triad mafia. The high-rise building corporation triad that operates in Manhattan that you were doing lots of business with, Donald Trump? You want to talk about that for a little while, Donald? I think we should talk about a lot of that, Donald Trump. your involvement with the Bin Ladens, the Bonifars, and the Khashoggis. You spent a lot of time hanging out with them, partying with them, and dancing and listening to music and doing all kinds of, moving money around, like Joe Biden's son and the Russians. Hey, Joe Biden, your son's guiltier than guilty can be. And Hillary Clinton, all that money you took from the Saudi Arabians, man, you're guilty as guilty can be. And all those other foreign donors that you destroyed when you destroyed all those emails, you're guiltier than guilty too, Hillary. And you know something, Donald J. Trump, Hillary's one of your pals. And word has it, she's one of your cousins. She's a cousin of yours. So when the Bushes and the Clintons and Donald J. Trump and Oliver North and Secord and, Bill Casey and Bud McFarlane. Hey, Bud McFarlane. He was from Glens Falls, That's for a friend of mine if she happens to watch this. Old Bud McFarlane from Glens Falls. His daughter, I guess, went to the Glens Falls High School. Glens Falls Senior High School. And, Principal Rommel. Yeah, old Principal Rommel. Everybody loved Principal Rommel there at Glens Falls High School. Glens Falls Warriors. A lot of interesting Marine Corps intelligence and all kinds of CIA operatives that went to Glens Falls High School. Isn't that amazing? I even got members of my own family that were naval intelligence. So when I talk about skyscrapers and how they collapse internally because they're hollow and all the debris falls down inside the building, as the outside of the building busts out from a massive debris pile, shearing off floor deck after floor deck after floor deck, boom, 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 boom. It's one of the reasons I'm an original member of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. The reality in this country is that smoke and mirrors and distractions are used to keep people's attention away from, they want you distracted, to look away from the financing of all these black operations. Who's writing the checks? Hillary Clinton? Come on down, Bill Clinton. Bring Barack Obama and Joe Biden with you, and George Bush and Mr. Potato Head. Bring Mr. Potato Head with you. And Big Dick Cheney there. Oh, word has it old Dick Cheney's got a big pecker. That's why they call him Big Dick. That's why he was out screwing around with that ambassador from Norway or Switzerland or wherever she was from and shot his partner in the face there in that ranch down in Texas where Judge Anthony Scalia happened to suffocate under a pillow. Judge Anthony Scalia died at that very same ranch in Texas. Isn't that amazing? Where I built skyscrapers. Right there at Lamar Terrace. Uptown Houston. Downtown Houston. Out by Bush International Airport. Down around, what was that called? There, Ellington Air Force Base. Hobby Field. Hobby Airport. Donald Trump. I think it's time to have a very serious discussion on the scientific evidence involved in all the massive money laundering that the financiers of your real estate empire have been caught in. And again, this message is going out to some friends over in Tennessee. They're very confused as to why the brakes have been, the emergency brake, they've basically stopped the progression of this federal case. Because the money launderers at the heart of the case in Greenville, Tennessee, are the very same financiers of Donald Trump's real estate empire. Now, Judge Robert Leon Jordan was appointed to the federal bench by Ronald Reagan, who was president just before George Bush Sr. became president. He was vice president under Ronald Reagan, who appointed this Republican judge, Robert Leon Jordan, to the federal bench in Greenville, Tennessee. Now we're suing Deutsche Bank, we're suing JP Morgan Chase, we're suing Credit Suisse, some of the very same operators that were at the World Trade Centers. The hollow building that collapsed internally. Who's financing all these clandestine, super duper secret wars? Oliver North and Admiral Poindexter and Bud McFarland and Joanna King. Come on, Joanna King. Why didn't you get Secretary of State James Baker of Baker and Botts, the law firm in Houston, Texas, Judge Lee Rosenthal? My old friend, Judge Lee Rosenthal. She worked for Jimmy Baker, the Secretary of State that was wheeling and dealing in money to the Shah of Iran and wheeling and dealing in money to Manuel Noriega and wheeling and dealing in money to Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos and wheeling and dealing in money to the Mujahideen and the Taliban. Don't everybody remembers when Ronald Reagan, who appointed Judge Robert Leon Jordan to the federal bench, had the Taliban over to the White House for a little party. He called them the equivalent of America's patriotic founding fathers. That's what Ronald Reagan called Osama bin Laden's pals. I'm not making this stuff up. It's history. So the man that put Robert Leon Jordan, a Republican, on the bench has got a case of money laundering and racketeering and conspiracy involving Donald Trump's bankster gangsters in Greenville, Tennessee, and apparently they're blocking the case. They will not issue a scheduling order, and they're refusing to allow any discovery. We can't get the records from the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. That's for Andrew Lehman at Certified Forensic Loan Auditors. I suggest that Andrew Lehman start examining Donald Trump's relationships with Deutsche Bank and Deutsche Bank's relationships with JP Morgan Chase Home Finance and all this money laundering that Credit Suisse has been aided and abetted in by the Select Portfolio Services involving Donald Trump's favorite financiers, Donald Trump's benefactors. Donald Trump has a real estate empire because of these dirty money laundering slobs from Frankfurt, Germany. Can you imagine 500 cops showing up at your building and accusing you of money laundering? I mean, talk about computer databases and data shadows and all the electronic records. Right, Hillary Clinton? You reckon they used BleachBit yet, Hillary? How about you, Bill Clinton? George Bush? Joe Biden? Come on, Joe Biden. You and your son there and your relationships with the Russians, did you use BleachBit too, Joe Biden? So, folks, when people call me just a goofy old man, I want you to remember something. I built docks. I built all kinds of houses. I built all sorts of apartment complexes and condominium projects and townhomes. Built a lot of townhouses. And I built low-rise, I built mid-rise, and I built high-rise. Hospitals, libraries, colleges, high schools, great big churches. Ask Arthur Young, Pastor Arthur Young in Houston, Texas, who built the Second Baptist Church. Right behind the Houstonian Estates, by the way. Where President George Bush and his wife Babs partied with the Clintons and the Kings and Charlie Wilson, and they were running Iran-Contra, and they were running Charlie Wilson's war, and they were running all that garbage in the Philippines, and they were running all the Panama Papers stuff. They were running Manuel Noriega down in Panama, and they were running dope, Barry Seal, and Mena, Arkansas, and the Clintons. That whole freaking history of the Clintons and the Arkansas industrial Development Bank, and all that dirt dealing and land flipping and daisy chaining. Scientific evidence, folks. Where the hell did all those trillions vanish to? Christopher Wray, William Barr, you want to chime in here? Bring Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder, and bring my good old pal Eric Schneiderman with you. Eric Schneiderman, $25 billion in hush money, the big settlement. Barack Obama, Michelle Obama. Let's talk about the great big hush money settlement and your brand new $15 million mansion out there, and I guess it's at Nantucket. You're on the island of Nantucket. $15 million for a mansion. You got a mansion in Hawaii, you got a mansion in Chicago, and you got apparently mansions all over planet Earth. Where'd you come up with all those bucks? And the Clintons are filthy rich from huge amounts of foreign donors, but I guess they bleach bitted it and smashed it with hammers and put, they burned them. They burned the damn phones or something. That's right. Hillary Clinton said they wiped down the computer databases. So my suggestion to the World Trade Center crowd is to examine who was doing financial transactions in the towers that were hollow. They're hollow, folks. And who was operating in World Trade Center 7, and why they'd want to destroy all those records. Why would they want to destroy all the records in the Pentagon? Did he say the missile? Dick Cheney, I think, wasn't it? Don Rumsfeld was talking about the missile that hit the Pentagon. And then, of course, our friends at Judicial Watch and Tom Fenton had to fight the government for a couple of years there to get the security videos of the missile flying in right down on the grass. You can't fly an airliner like that. That was a missile. And if you look at the video, there's no airliner in the video. I'm sorry, it's not there. And when you look at the debris from Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and you look at the debris from the Pentagon, there's a lot of reason to question where the hell are the planes. Where are the planes? And who was in them and what was flying them? Oh, and to end this video up, because my battery's getting low, the day before the attack on the Pentagon, 2.3, 2.7, something like that, trillion was missing. Rumsfeld said they couldn't account for 2.5 trillion reserve notes. You know, helicopter money. And then later it was determined it wasn't 2.5 trillion, it was more like 9 trillion in quantitative easing helicopter money. I'm not making this stuff up, folks. I'm proficient at scientific evidence. Look up what helicopter money and quantitative fiat, bills of credit, bills of exchange, shin plaster. Look up shin plaster. And then, of course, the Federal Reserve, Congressman Alan Grayson, they couldn't account for 9 trillion either. So let's see, that's 18 trillion that the grandiose, glorious government that Judge Robert Leon Jordan works for, the judge in Greenville, who was appointed by George Bush's boss there, George Bush Sr., Mr. CIA himself. Ronald Reagan, the one that sold all the missiles to the Ayatollah Khomeini and swapped and traded in all kind of weapons with the Contras in Nicaragua. And hell, Ronald Reagan had the equivalent of America's founding patriots. He had the Taliban over to the White House for a party. And you know damn well that Ronald Reagan gave the Taliban a bunch of money. Well, bills of credit, helicopter money. Gave them quantitative easing bucks. So there's Ronald Reagan's connection to Judge Robert Leon Jordan. And this case where we're going after J.P. Morgan, that's Jamie Dimon, and Demon or whatever, Jamie Demon, of J.P. Morgan Chase Home Finance there, and all these predatory foreclosures and predatory mortgages, all these massively inflated real estate appraisals and all these 125% no down payment loans and the money laundering mechanisms of Deutsche Bank are at the heart of this case. Donald J. Trump and Mr. Pence and Mr. Christopher Wray and William Barr. And hey, here's one for you. This is where I'm going to end this video. You know that guy Trey Gowdy? You know, the guy that looks like a wet rat. And he kept whining and screaming and carrying on about Hillary Clinton and never really got anything done. Just like Donald Trump, he was going to go after Hillary and lock her up. And, well, he installed Sessions, and Sessions was a farce. And then he's brought in William Barr, and William Barr definitely ain't touching the Clintons. Because the Clintons and the Bushes and Mitt Romney and a bunch of other ones, Trey Gowdy, they know where all the bodies are buried. So now Trey Gowdy is representing Deutsche Bank. Trey Gowdy is protecting the biggest money laundering scumbags in the history of the world. He works for Nelson and Mullins, and he's, partnered up there with Baker and Donaldson that are representing Credit Suisse and Select Portfolio Services and J.P. Morgan Bank. Baker and Donaldson, that's Senator Baker, and Nelson and Mullins that are protecting the biggest, crookedest, trashiest criminal banking enterprises in the history of the world. They've already been fined huge amounts of money for money laundering. They've already been fined huge amounts of money for rigging LIBOR, rigging the gold markets. Hell, they've been caught and fined for every imaginable crime in banking on a massive scale. It's been going on for many years, decades actually. Deutsche Bank goes back to Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich, the Nazis of Germany. And then, of course, you got the banks of China, which are, financing Joe Biden's son. And then you got a bunch of Russian mafia that's financing Joe Biden's son and, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. And you got just vast, unimaginable amounts of wealth at the heart of Donald J. Trump's real estate empire coming out of Deutsche Bank. Laundering money out of Europe to the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Now, why in the world would the Republicans want to put the brakes on and stop the prosecution of all this money laundering in the federal courts in Greenville, Tennessee? Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, compulsory discovery is part of the federal court scheme. You got to produce your records. Consumer Finance Protection Board, FHA, HUD, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and a whole litany of other alphabet agencies of the USA Incorporated, Andrew Lehman, certified forensic loan auditors, and all these other people that are just perplexed at why these bankster sons of bitches have been allowed to rape the American homeowners and all these subprime predatory foreclosures and all this bundling up of these securitized mortgages and all these other, fancy pants, daisy chaining, churning, flipping real estate and banking schemes that Donald J. Trump's financiers of Donald J. Trump's real estate empire are involved in up to their stinking freaking eyeballs. Right, Donald J. Trump? So, folks, I'm going to leave that video here. I'm getting up to 30 minutes, and I probably lost half the listeners because they thought this was a video about a hollow set of towers that went, let's see, they went, well, the top 20 floors fell down because they're so heavy, and the top 20 floors, they had to fall inside the building. Most of it went inside and made the floors beneath it go boom, 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 from the inside. The debris pile inside the towers, just like the debris pile on all these crooked-ass bankers is going to crush them. I'm going to crush them. William Barr, Christopher Wray, Judge Robert Leon Jordan, I'm going to crush them. That lawsuit that's in Greenville, Tennessee, implicates the largest financial network of criminals in the history of the earth. Now they launder money through the subprime mortgage markets, and they use subprime predatory foreclosures to do the hocus pocus and clean up all the money. That's from my old pal Ken Dost and Renee Powers and Renee Weiler and all these other Robert Wagoners and Judge Carter out in Los Angeles. Judge Carter. The way that these massive predatory foreclosures have gone down, involving illegal, predatory, no documentation, stated income, all this other subprime garbage, that's how they were laundering the money, Judge Carter. And now, Judge Carter, you're a material witness, my friend, along with everybody else in this country that's been scratching their heads about who the hell was writing all the checks to the Taliban, the Mujahideen, the ISIS. Well, Hillary Clinton said we financed them. Remember that video of Hillary Clinton telling the Congress of the United States that we created Al-Qaeda? We created the Mujahideen? We created the ISIS? We created Benjamin Netanyahu? We created the Shah of Iran? We created Manuel Noriega? We created the Marcoses in the Philippines? We created the Contras? Who's writing all the checks? George Bush Jr. And what really was going on in that boardroom, the meeting room, that I built in the Houstonian Estates, when Oliver North and Richard Secord and the whole gang would show up at the hotel, the Hyatt Regency Hotel, and I think there was a Marriott as well in the Galleria in Houston, where y'all posse up and take up your super duper secret donations from Houston's crookedest bankers to run your Mujahideen, your Al-Qaeda, and your ISIS. You were funding it right out of Houston, Texas, uptown Houston, right there in Lamar Terrace. Come on, Donald J. Trump, you know who the Triad Development Group are. They were operating up in LDS land, too, up in Salt Lake City, and involved heavily with Brigham Young University. Judge Stephen Jones, the Triad Mafia of Khashoggi, Ghebbanifar, and the Bin Ladens were dealing heavily with Thomas Basmajian of Select Portfolio Services and the Romneys and all those other interesting little quorum of 12 and quorum of 100. The Marriott Center. Gordon B. Hinckley. Come on down, Gordon B. Hinckley. And bring, who's the current prophet of the LDS Church there? The big bankster, gangster, real estate development guy there. I can't think of his name right now. He's got that long nose and he's pretty weird looking. Runs a big real estate empire for the LDS Church. The LDS Development Church that were in bed with Khashoggi and Ghebbanifar and the Bin Ladens. Professor Stephen Jones. Isn't that interesting, Stephen Jones, how there's more crooked LDS Mormons in bed with the terrorists than there is thermite in the dust of the World Trade Centers? Fascinating story, isn't it, Professor Stephen Jones? I can't think of that bankster gangster prophet of the LDS development. They're huge in the real estate development in the LDS Mormon Church all over the nation. That's why they're so wealthy, by the way, is they're vastly into real estate development all over the world, actually. And I still can't think of that prophet. Well, I keep saying prophet of the LDS Church. Zion's Bank and Far West Bank, come on down. Interesting stuff. So, okay, folks. Now you know about hollow World Trade Centers and why the floors, as they collapse, they go boom, 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 falling inside the exterior of the towers. And now you need to take a real close, hard look into who was operating in World Trade Center 7. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it right there, and as always, hasta la vista. God bless, and you betcha, we're coming back.